and we're delighted to welcome our first American speaker to this year's summit. Aaron C. Radlett is Vice President Global Communications of Hilton Worldwide, one of the biggest hospitality companies in the world. Aaron will talk to us about how he regards measurement as the key to the success of his team and to the company. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's always a little bit of pressure to be introduced as the first American. I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to that, but I appreciate being here, and I actually got in a few minutes early. In fact, I've been here since Friday and have been able to enjoy London, so this was a nice treat, and at least right now I'm not jet-lagged, so if I make any mistakes, I can't blame it on that. But welcome, everybody. This is a unique opportunity because I give speeches all over the world, obviously, but I don't get a chance to always do them in a Hilton hotel. So I've actually given speeches at lots of hotels. I don't like to admit it, but I have. So this is very unique for us, and we're very pleased to have you here. This is one of our newest hotels, and it's a gem for us. And hopefully you're enjoying yourselves, and the team here is great, and let us know if we can do anything for you. But one thing that we want to do just to kind of kick things off as a welcome from Hilton is to give everybody here in the room a mimosa. So we got the team here kind of standing by. So if you could come on in, team, and we've got glasses for everybody, and thank you very much. We'll do a quick toast, but we thought we'd kick this off in style. If you could just start, there's only just, oh wait, there's actually not that much for everybody. This is a little embarrassing. Well, okay, I have to admit something. So I work in PR, right? And I think everybody in this room can understand that our budgets are a little bit less than everybody else. So if marketing was up here doing this, we would have the finest champagne. We would have a jazz band over in the corner. We would have fresh squeezed orange juice. But now I only have 3 trays of slightly filled glasses of mimosa. So anyway, you can go ahead and pass those out. Thank you. Thank you to the team. At least it's not the team's fault, it's my fault. But in all honesty, we did that on purpose. And I promise you that I really did enough funds that everybody at the end of this presentation will get a mimosa. But bear with me just for a few minutes because we did this to sort of prove a point. You can see here in my hand, this is kind of how I felt about 7 years ago when I started at Hilton. I had interviewed with the CEO, I had interviewed with most of the executive committee. I was starting this great new job as Vice President of Global Communications at the time, and I thought, this couldn't get any better. If you look at the Hilton brand, this is an almost 100-year-old brand. It's one of the best brands in the world. From a communicator's perspective, this was a dream come true because I get to talk about beautiful hotels every day. It's a non-controversial industry. Everybody likes to talk about this. And it just is ripe for creativity and being able to launch lots of great communications campaigns. So I walked in the door feeling great, and I sat down in my office, and one of the first things I did was I wrote an email for our CEO, and I went out and asked my assistant if she could distribute it out. And she looked up and she said, oh, we don't have a distribution list to send out an email for the whole company. I thought, okay, well, that's a little bit strange. All right, well, tell you what, can you give me my login information for the intranet? Okay, I logged in the internet. There was hardly anything there. It looked like the first generation of AOL. So I was a little bit more concerned. I noticed that there was hardly any content on the screen. In fact, the article I remember was about 3 months old, and it was an article about a celebrity guest check-in. And it was the lead singer from Hootie and the Blowfish. And I thought, we gotta think about how we do content around here and amp it up a little bit more. And then I started digging into it a little bit more, and I realized we really didn't have any communications plans to refer back to, no policies and procedures. We didn't have any social media channels that we could post anything on for the corporation, and we certainly didn't have any measurement. And so that's what I wanted to prove the point here of, is I walked in the door, I had this great new job, but I also realized that we didn't quite have our glass totally filled up with what we wanted to accomplish as a team and what we needed as a company. So that brings me to my next point, which is when we were about 7 years ago, there was transformation happening at the company. So for those of you familiar with our history, Blackstone had just bought us. We were moving our headquarters from Beverly Hills over to the Washington, D.C. area, and we realized that we needed to very quickly transform everything about the company, and we had to do that very quickly. And communications was very important to all of that, both from a cultural transformation on the inside, but also telling our story so that everybody saw it from the outside. And so the CEO took a chance on a young VP of communications and said, all right, see what you can do. We literally had 3 people in the communications department at the time, and we were working long hours. We were put in charge of, in the first month, rolling out our new corporate ID. We had all of our senior leaders coming in for the first time all around the world, and we had to host a meeting with them and the governor of Virginia and lots of other dignitaries. And we somehow had to communicate that this sleepy giant was about to become a much bigger, broader company. And I'm going to have a spoiler alert and tell you now, 7 years fast forward, we are now 50% larger. We are now the largest hospitality company in the world. And if you can see here, we've got 13 brands, over 4,600 hotels. And that is significantly larger than when I started. So, but that comes to, you can't manage what you can't measure. And this is the theme of my presentation. Because what I want to be able to bring across today is measurement was key to our success. That measurement is not just something that you do at the end of a campaign. It's not the last page in the book. It's not, oh, let's go ahead and do all the research and execute a great plan, and then all of a sudden you, at the end, say, oh gosh, we got to go back and we got to tell everybody what we did. It should always be the seed that allows you to start a cycle along the way that basically replicates over time. You plant a seed, you grow a little bit more. You plant a seed, you grow a little bit more. The seed is the measurement. If you're not communicating what you're measuring, you're never going to be able to grow a team, you're never going to be able to have the results that you want. Basically what I saw was, if we were going to be able to advance our communications function, I couldn't just walk in the door and I say to the CEO, Chris Nacetta, glad you hired me. I need another $5 million and 20 more people on my team. Just wasn't going to happen that way. So I had to incrementally look at it and say, what can we accomplish right now? And then let me go back and tell everybody what we did. And then what can we accomplish after that? And let me go back and tell everybody what we did. So that first slide illustrated that that's measurement 1.0 basically. But what I'm much more interested in communicating is, this is how we see things over at Hilton, where basically you discuss stakeholder expectations, you execute on the campaign, you measure the campaign, and then you use measurement to earn additional resources. So that's not one point in time, that's literally cyclical, and if you do it right, it spirals out over time. And it definitely shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all model. What we've noticed at Hilton is, if you start thinking that way, you're never going to accomplish anything. I've seen a lot of people make the mistake where they go to great conferences like this and they learn a lot, or they're part of professional organizations and they teach a lot, and you come from other jobs and you say, this is how we did it over there, and you go in and you want to be impressive and you want to be able to walk into the boardroom and communicate that you've got it all covered. And I think that that's a huge mistake, because every company culture is different, every CEO is different, every executive committee is different. What you want to be able to start with is, how do you define success? And it sounds so simple, but literally every day I have to remind myself of that. And of course, once you find out how you define success, then you basically go back and you say, we did it. And now what would you like to do next? And what would you like to do after that? Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we're reliant just on what the CEO tells us to do, but I would recommend starting there. And I would also recommend having, if you're lucky enough to have it, like we do over at Hilton, have a very close relationship with the CEO. Make sure that you talk with the CEO and with the other key stakeholders as much as possible, because it's amazing. You don't get to be CEO without expressing your opinion. And so they're usually very comfortable telling you what's on their mind and what they would like. The next thing that's important to keep in mind is that as a CEO, and also for an executive committee, a lot of these folks are numbers people at heart. And I think this is something that we all struggle with a little bit. If you think about it, My CEO went to school to do finance. We've got a board that's made up of a lot of private equity people. They don't necessarily understand some of the communications metrics that we might be using. So I always want to start thinking about what language am I speaking to them? What would resonate with them? What sort of metrics would come across loudest and clearest? And one thing that's very important is that we wanted to make sure that we're looking at our overall company key strategic priorities. So this is one of the first things that we did when we came in as a communications team. We decided that the entire company was very separate and in pieces, and there were different regions doing different things, different hotels doing different things, different brands doing different things. And part of being able to transform the company's culture and communicate that to everybody is that we had to define one vision, one mission, one set of values, and one set of key strategic priorities. So not only were we communicating out these key strategic priorities, but we were also measuring our results against those 4 business key strategic priorities. So I was already speaking the language that the other executives were using. This is basically our comprehensive approach to measurement, and there's basically 5 buckets, and I'm going to go through each one of them a little bit more. But first we ask, what do our stakeholders care about? Then we say, what conversations are taking place related to Hilton? We say, how are our campaigns performing? How does our communications work compare with others? And how is communications delivering for the business overall? So let's start first with, what do our stakeholders care about? If you can see here, there are a few examples, and I want to make sure to show you some of these. But we basically have all sorts of things that fall into this category. We've got focus groups that we do. We talk to our team members. We have an annual survey that goes out. We do quick pulse surveys as much as possible. And then, of course, as I already mentioned, we have check-ins with our business executives. Here's one slide that shows one of our recent focus groups with our team members. We went out and we surveyed a lot of folks. We also talked to some of our guests, as you can see here, honors members, and I know some of you in this room are honors members. So these are just some examples of some things that we hear from our team members, and we quantify that and we build those into our campaigns. And we basically say over time, over incremental time periods, how are we able to track against what they're saying then, and now what are they saying after we come back to them. We also partner with best-in-class companies. Some of them are in this room right now. And one of the companies that we recently partnered with is Frank Luntz, and he's an American. He's on Fox News a lot. He's a pollster, but he also does corporate work. And this is just an example of how we measure our customer favorability, which also shows that we have a broad understanding of what communications is, and that we also talk to all the different departments so that we're not just doing measurement on our own over in communications, but we're partnering with marketing, we're partnering with sales, we're partnering with everybody so that we're not just devoting our budget and then nobody else is seeing it across the company. They're also able to feed into how they want to do a focus group like this one that we did with Luntz, and then also able to share in the results. Here's another slide that just shows what came back. Of course, I was very careful in terms of how I selected each one of the results, but these are just a few things that came back that we were very happy to hear in terms of our customer perceptions out there and how communications as well as other parts of the company are advancing the ball. So then into the next column, what conversations are taking place? So a lot of this is very familiar with all of you. We had to start when I came into Hilton, daily news reports, news alerts that go out every day. We do quarterly media coverage reports, and we do those with Ketchum. We do social media listening, as you can imagine. We do a digital year in review, also with social media performance reports, and then we monitor across all different aspects of the tactics that we are deploying. So one-off media monitoring, the lobby is our intranet and how that's tracking. We've got brand community sites, and then also world events we're keeping track of course, across the board. So this is an example of what we do with Ketchum. This is our quarterly report, and it's very small, but basically how we do this is we measure share of voice, we measure where the peaks and valleys are, not only for our own coverage, but that is something, again, numbers that our executives can relate to and that they can understand. We also put out a digital year in review. So this is the cover of our one from last year. We very carefully show our incremental progress. So I mentioned when I started, we didn't have any social media channels, and now over the years we can show how we built that out. Now these are just for our corporate channels, but we also combine up results for our brand channels as well. Here's just a couple more slides where it shows how we do that and dig deeper with Facebook and Twitter and everybody else. Another important point here is that we have our intranet. It no longer looks like the first generation of AOL. I'm happy to say that we launched a new one, and we listen to our team members. So you can see over here that these are all conversations, feedback that our team members are telling us. We can measure page views. We can measure how many responses we've had. We can incrementally see what content is most popular and what content isn't, so that we can kind of change our directions as we go. And then also, it's important to point out that we also want to tell our story by talking about our results. So I know that's a little bit confusing, so let me explain it a little bit more. So it's really important, communications added to our cultural transformation, as I already talked about. But we also talked about that cultural transformation with the media. So we basically get two hits there. We basically get credit for helping with the cultural transformation, but then when I'm working with a reporter and Chris is talking to reporters, I make sure that communications gets credit for some of that, and we're mentioned in some of these articles. So that's really important. And then, just to be really meta about it, I also come to conferences like this, and I get 3 hits out of it, because I talk about what we talked about, and then it gets the media coverage. And then here is the third column. So how are our campaigns performing? And there's a whole lot of things that we do along this route. And you can see here different reports. We do big campaign recaps. We did a huge recap, of course, around our IPO, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We did a Great Place to Work result report. And then we also started last year a Team Member Appreciation Week, which the team members in this room are probably familiar with, but we basically did a big, huge celebration thanking our team members around the world, and we did a recap of that. And then we also launched a campaign called Heart of Hilton. And Heart of Hilton is really important because we have a heartofhilton.com website. You all can go check it out. It's got lots of videos for us and everything else. But it was also something that we could put out to our team members as well as the external world. So one thing that I would emphasize as you're looking at your measurement and your metrics is don't just focus on internal over here and external over there. Figure out how campaigns can go across that boundary. And you can have a website that you would refer to over on your intranet, or on your intranet you could have a hashtag that refers over to your social media channels. Here's just a recap of our newest brand, which is True by Hilton. And we had a very successful rollout of that. Basically how we translated everything into results and measurement. This is an example of a video. So for our all team member meeting, we introduced the meeting with this. And this is really important because, again, it's another way that we show our results to our team members.
We have 4,500 hotels in 100 countries, so there's always going to be spots that are hotter and colder. But I'd say generally, the business is pretty strong around the world, being led by Asia Pacific.
We've got a strategy that's been really focused on organic growth. Over the last 7 or 8 years, we've grown the company faster than anybody in the business.
So I just wanted to play a little bit of that. It's a little bit of a longer video, but again, what we're able to do is we start out literally our team member meeting that takes place twice a year. We broadcast it all over the world to our hotels and our offices. And it's not bragging to start out that meeting showing all of our great media results, because we want to show the company how well we're doing. But it also happens to be a hidden motivation for us because we're talking about all the media coverage that we achieved as a team as well. Another way that we've done this is with our Heart of Hilton campaign, which I mentioned just earlier. But we put these posters up in all of our hotels and in all of our office break rooms. And you can see here there are some results that refer back to exactly the campaigns that we worked on. So the Team Member Appreciation Week that I mentioned before, or the corporate responsibility results that we had. So again, it's a way that we can report, but also make the communications the metric. Next column is how do we communicate and how do we compare to others. So basically we measure ourselves obviously on the big list. We also have executive awards, and we also do external communications. So here are a few of the awards that we've done. Those are ones that Chris have achieved. Here are some of the awards that we have achieved over on the communications side. So not just for our executives in the company, but we also look at what we do for the communications team. And then the last column here is how does communications deliver for the business overall? So we started an accomplishment deck way back 7 years ago. I started the story there, and we still track against that, and I show that to the CEO on a consistent basis. We, of course, have our annual report that we put out. We have an annual corporate responsibility report, And then, of course, non-communications business metrics. And I think that this is an important point to bring across too, and this is what I say to the team all the time, is don't think of yourselves as a communications team. Every single team at a company is a sales team at the end of the day. We like to say in the hospitality business that we put heads in beds, and ultimately that's what we're all measured against. So if we're not doing that, then we have to take something off of our list because it's not effective. I think sometimes we're all very creative people. We want to show really cool campaigns. But at the end of the day, if they're not actually tracking against sales and bringing people into our hotels, then there's not much more we can do about it. So here's that timeline that I mentioned. So going all the way back, we kind of show our incremental progress, what we introduced, what we did along the way, some of our major media hits, some of our major internal communications campaigns. I mentioned our all-team member meeting. We try to do something kind of creative with our CEO every time. So we do it in a different location. When we were in Dallas, he came out on a horse. You can see there with his cowboy hat on. Here's our corporate responsibility report. And here's just a couple of our accomplishments over the recent years. So when I started, we were a private company. We were owned by Blackstone. Over the course of time, we initially went ahead and rolled out as our public company. And The good news is that we've got a team here that can clean that up very well, I can promise you that. One of the things that we did, by the way, when we rolled out on the stock exchange floor is everybody on the stock exchange has trade jackets that they wear, and we didn't want to do a typical trade jacket with our symbol on the back, so we thought we're in the hotel business, we're going to do bathrobes instead, so we got a lot of coverage out of that. When I started, we were not on the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list. We now are on the 100 Companies Best list. And now, just as a recap, this is our comprehensive approach to measurement. You can see here everything laid out. But again, I think the most important point here is that everything has to be integrated. It all has to come together, and that's the most important component of all this. And I would also say that the last note I want to end on is we measure a lot, we report a lot, all of that is very important, but just like when our CEO said that culture was the most important thing for our company if we were going to transform everything about our business, it was also the most important thing for communications. So whenever I go ahead and I talk to my team, the first metric, the first measurement I always bring across is that we got along well as a team, that we didn't have infighting, that under a lot of pressure, we came across and we trusted each other and we did it together. And if you think of that IPO, for example, we had a list of 500 different things that we needed to accomplish. Not once were there people bickering or stopping by our office and saying, this person is doing this or anything like that. If you can get your culture right, that's the most important measurement and metric. And everything else flows from there. And unfortunately, I don't have a magic solution in terms of how you measure that, but I would say that I know it when I see it. So when I walk down the hall and I hear my team laughing and having a good time, or when I walk into our Monday morning meeting and everybody's talking about their weekends, that is the essential ingredient to a great team and also to great measurement and metrics. And I have to thank the team because without them, we wouldn't have accomplished any of this. So that is basically the recap.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
So one thing that came across very clearly for me, Aaron, stay at the lectern, would you?
What's that?
Would you stay at the lectern, please?
Oh, yes, of course.
One thing that came across very clearly in that presentation was making the connection with the new chief executive and being able to talk the language of the C-suite. Would you come on the stage?
All right.
Thank you. How would you like to say a little bit more about how you made that connection? Language is very important, we find, at these conferences. Some people struggle with actually communicating to the C-suite or getting the C-suite to take them seriously because there's a disconnect in their language.
Mm-hmm.
Any tips for the room?
Yeah, of course. I do have some tips, but before we start, if you don't mind, I did promise everybody mimosas. So I think the staff is out there. That's what I was just checking on. But do we have everybody ready with the mimosas back there right now? Can we have everybody come out with the mimosas? So while I'm answering that question, we are going to make sure. I did promise everybody. I think everybody has been served, even in the back. Are we good? All right. So this is basically my way of hopefully getting a little bit better results on my metric for giving my speech, and then also being able to make this a little bit more of a lively conversation. But basically my answer to that is, it's amazing to me how much isn't about a specific metric or a number. And this is something we all know, but again, I think we lose sight of it sometimes because we're so stuck in the day-to-day, and we're always thinking about what the next PowerPoint presentation is going to be or the Excel spreadsheet readout. It's about relationships, plain and simple. Is if I didn't have a relationship with my CEO, if the company didn't see that my office was 2 doors down from him and that was the emphasis that the CEO gave to communications, then nothing else could really happen. And what I have seen is where some people go wrong is they're always coming in with piles of paper instead of, again, having a conversation and being able to form those bonds. In really effective communications, you have to know the leader, you have to know the CEO, you have to be able to say, what's on your mind? And if you establish that trusted relationship, then he or she is going to be much more likely to read anything that you bring into their office.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to go to the room now for questions. Microphone towards the side.
Yes, good morning. A very interesting presentation. Like a lot of people here, I'm from a PR agency, so most of what we do outside of content is media relations and social media. So from an internal commerce point of view, particularly for a hotel group, which is obviously mostly B2C, but obviously some B2B as well, what slice of the cake, what percentage of your measurement would you say comes down to actual media coverage versus internal comms versus speaking events versus internal feedback, etc.? Just out of curiosity to see how that impacts on your overall measurement results.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a few thoughts come to mind. The first one is we obviously work with a lot of different agencies. Edelman is our agency of record on the grand scale. I also mentioned that we work with Ketchum and others around the world. But one thing that I've noticed is that this doesn't work if we don't have complete integration. And I've tried a lot of different models over time, but what we have now settled on is I literally have people from Edelman sitting in my office, basically with the rest of the team. And the way that I like to describe it is we all wear the same jersey, we're all same team. I don't want somebody to raise their hand in a meeting and say, I'm an Edelman person. They're part of the Hilton team. And they also work completely on the account whenever possible. That way they're not distracted with lots of different things. And they can be strategic because they understand the company. They're under the roof along with us. Because what happens if you don't do that is you have basically, you have a meeting, you have an agency meeting, the agency goes off and has a meeting about the client, they come back, and you just have a lot of disconnects. And what you end up having is an agency that does a lot of tactics, but they're not able to integrate through strategy. So as much as possible, I would definitely emphasize that you should be able to be integrated with your client as much as you can. And then the next part is also about integration. It goes to your question, which is, we don't look at it as internal here, external here, social here, executive communications here, corporate responsibility here. As much as possible, we're already doing the work. Let's make sure that we're breaking down the boundaries between all of those different things. Now, if I looked at it on a day-to-day basis, maybe it's about 30% on the external side, maybe about 30% on the internal side, you know, but it ebbs and flows. And if you're really doing this right, it's not one or the other. It's everything is connected up at the same time. And that's one of the things I think that has allowed us to be successful as a team because we all sit together at the same table.
Thank you. Room for one more question? Oh, two more questions. Okay, we'll take gentleman in the, looks from here, a green shirt towards the back, and then the lady down here. Okay.
Hi, Stephen Howe from DMVGL. I've been following your speech on Twitter as well as listening to you, obviously, and people are quoting you a lot saying that you can't manage what you can't measure, and also that obviously if it didn't happen, if you can't measure it, it didn't happen. And yet at the end you say that when you listen to your team laughing and have a good time, that's the key ingredients to success. How do you reconcile those two things? Because for me, the second one seems less tangible than the first.
So let me just make sure I understand what your question is. So basically what you're saying is, on the cultural side, we have to make sure that the team is right? But we also have to be beholden to our numbers and to our metrics, and how do you reconcile the two?
I hear from social media, people listening to you, that if you can't put a metric against it, then it doesn't exist.
Yes.
The key takeaway from what you're saying is that you have to be able to measure everything, otherwise you can't succeed. And yet right at the very end, you said that the key ingredient for you to a successful team is the team that's having a good time, enjoying their job, you can hear them laughing as you walk past. So how do you reconcile those two very different things?
Yeah, I would say that it's a great question. I would say that they're completely tied together. So what I was trying to say is that you always start with a great culture. Whether or not we're talking about Hilton Worldwide overall, teams have to be aligned. Everybody has to know what you're working towards. If I go into one of the hotels here in London, I have to hear from some of the same things from the team members here as when I walk into our office in Shanghai, or when I go to LA and I visit the Beverly Hilton. And in much the same way, we have to look at that for our team in communications. We have to be getting along, we have to have good rapport, we have to be able to work well together. Once you have that, everything else flows from there. So I'm just saying that that's your starting square, and then you move into that cycle that I was talking about earlier, which is make sure that you're measuring everything, that you're showing it to everybody, and that incrementally over time, you're asking for more money and more resources. But if you basically say, I'm gonna start with just the reporting and the metrics, and you don't have a cohesive team, then your team is gonna be doing different reports. You're not gonna be able to do reports because they're all gonna be fighting with each other about who gets credit for what project. So much like how we transformed our culture for Hilton overall, I would say we did the same thing for our communications team. Does that help?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Okay, the final question, lady here, please.
Yes, hello, good morning. My name is Xenia Charlie-Scanlon. I'm with the Right Livelihood Award Foundation. So we had a similar situation where we had to really turn around a brand that has a lot of heritage and is quite traditional. And there's been a lot of resistance or questioning of change. So my question was, when you came on board and you had limited resources and you had to go for that low-hanging fruit, what did you start with? Did you start with the internal communications? Did you bring the brand digital? Did when you had to choose ultimately?
Yeah, so we like to say at Hilton that we're a 100-year-old startup company. And I think that very much is the culture that our CEOs tried to put in place and that we also as a communications team have. We never look at it as this is the way we've always done it. We always look at it as how can we do it better, unique, different than how it ever was before. And the nice thing about our culture is nobody stands in the way of that. So I think it's really important that first of all, you kind of have that as part of that piece of that overall pie. I would also say that emphasizing innovation is really important because just because we're a stodgy hotel company doesn't mean that we can't offer all of our innovations up to the media and talk about those innovations. So some of you might have heard that you can now select your room at a lot of different hotels. You can use your mobile phone as a key to get into a lot of your rooms. So bringing those things across, I think, is really important. And then the other part of your question, what's that?
It was about basically the culture change, whether or not you encountered any resistance and how you went to that.
Right. So in terms of culture change and if I encountered any resistance, every big company, we've got more than 300,000 team members around the world, every big company has some resistance to change. I think the most important thing, and this is where measurement and metrics are really important too, if people think that you know what you're talking about and they can see the measurement along the way, then you can bring them on board with you. And so that's, again, I think a very key piece to all of this. And if they're on board, then you're able to move forward. And for those of you that play chess, it definitely is a multi-dimensional game. You can't just start with internal or external or social. You have to every day come in and say, how can I move everything forward just a little bit more? Again, how do I integrate it? But what's most important during this day? And I think that's something that we all struggle with because we have all this incoming. We have media inquiries coming into us. We have requests from the company coming into us. But what I do is I allot an amount of time every day where I just put on my calendar, this is when I'm going to step back and I'm going to think about the bigger picture. I'm not going to just think about all the different incoming, and that's helped me a lot.
And I think, Aaron, now we've pretty much got the last servings of mimosa coming out.
There's more champagne in the back if y'all are interested. That's where I'll be. So
we'd like to thank you for the mimosa. That's a nice touch. But more importantly, thank you for being with us today. Aaron will be with us during the summit, so he will be around for you to put other questions to him. But now we're going to take a refreshment break upstairs in the gallery. Also an opportunity for those of you who were not here last night to say hello to the sponsors for us. Could I ask you to be back, ready to resume at 11 o'clock?